I'm going live. Good morning, everybody. All right. Let me get in here and so I can see everybody. Comments. Good morning. Let's get rid of my volume so we don't get back cross feed here. Good morning. I've got like, I have so many cords and power cords and foot controls. I have 4 Sergers set up here today to go over things with you. Hopefully it works like I want. We shall see. It could be, hope I got some sleep. Just a little, Miss Susan. Enough for me. It's overrated. Go. You can't get behind me. All right. Good morning, Miss Tina. Good morning. Good morning, Miss Ann. See, y'all make fun of me about losing my lists. Mom's running around here looking for her Starbucks cup. So it's not just me. I'm going to call it small business owner COVID brain. Good morning. Hopefully I have some new and exciting and maybe some informational, educational information for everybody today. So let's see, I think we'll give it another minute or two. How was everybody's evenings? Did we sew or anything last night? Y'all saw what I was doing. Sitting behind a computer. It's what I do best. Ms. Elise says she would agree. That cup is more important than my list. It's a very important piece of her day. So don't mess with mom and her hot chocolate. So yeah, I already have my my Dr. Pepper is already half gone.
Yes, thank you, Big Daddy.
Thank you, Big Daddy. Yes. Big Daddy got my breakfast and my Dr. Pepper this morning so that I can talk and hang out with you guys without yawning. Yay, Miss Tracy finished all her apple butter. I'm happy to hear that. Miss Gina's paper piecing for a mystery quilt. All right. So let's get started. I'm going to kind of go through my little presentation first, and then we'll switch over to the camera and samples and the machines and things like that. I'm just going to kind of show a couple of different techniques on what the machines can do and things like that. We're not going to get too technical with threading and all of that stuff, but we will cover a little taste of what a Serger or Overlocker is. All right, here we go. So the first question is what? What is it? Is it a Serger? Is it an Overlocker? What does it do? Why would I use it? Well, a Serger and an Overlocker are the same exact machine. It just depends upon who you are talking to, okay? The machine, basically it makes a stitch that overlocks on the edges. And if you talk to European clientele, it is an overlocker, and the technique that the overlocker does is serge. So overlocker is the noun and serge is the verb. In the US, like we do everything, you know, we use imperial measurements and not metric, and we have to be different. So we took the verb and turned it into a noun. And so we usually more commonly refer to them in the United States as a serger. But those terms can be used interchangeably. Okay, they are pretty much the same machine. Okay. What a serger or an overlocker does is basically its main purpose is to finish edges. Okay, you're very, and that's really, it'll finish edges, it'll roll hem, that type of thing. So you typically are going to find it in, these are the top 10 techniques that a serger or an overlocker, we typically use it for. And you're going to notice that a lot of it is garment related, but I do have some techniques that I'm going to show you that can be applied to purses and bags and quilts and things. So it's not just for garments. So we use it to sew, okay, to seam things together. So basically what it does is it finishes the edges, it wraps the edges in 2 threads, plus you have 2 needle threads if you choose a 4-thread stitch. We use it to put knits together. And part of the reason that we use it for knits a lot is because we have the ability to kind of control the feed dog speed. So we can adjust the amount of stretch or no stretch and kind of counterbalance the stretch in the knit. We use it to finish seams, roll hem edges, decorative edges. So in the top left corner there, what you're seeing is all thread. That ruffle is 100% thread. It's called serger lace. That's made on the on a serger. We use it to attach ribbings. Ribbings are what you find in t-shirt collars, cuffs, pants, things like that. We use it to stitch an elastic. Think lingerie, underwear, that type of thing. We use it to gather, chain stitch, and cover stitching. So those are kind of the basic techniques that we use a serger for. When do we use it? Most often associated with fashion sewing, okay, or garments. However, we do have applications for it in home dec and quilting too. But the base function of a serger is to finish seams. We use it to give a professional look to a garment or a project that we have created to keep seams from raveling and things like that. If you're a fabric washer, meaning that you wash fabric before you use it, you should have a serger in your life because you can, before you wash, you serge the cut edges and it will keep your fabric from raveling away, okay, and keep you from pulling out a knotted mess in your washing machine when it's finished washing. So that's really the main point, main focus. Okay, but we have a variety of different types of stitches that a overlocker can do. We have stitches that use 2 threads, 3 threads, 4 threads, and even some that use 5 threads. Okay, so if you have any questions as I'm going over this stuff today, please feel free to comment. You want to, yeah, just comment. Sorry. And I will go back through the comments and try to answer them and if I don't see it when I see it. So where do we use it? Typically we use it on the inside for for construction of garments, construction of bags, quilts, things like that. But it also can be used on the outside for visible embellishment. So on this image, this black line that you're seeing in this particular garment here is actual stitching, and it's a flat lock that was used. to give that decorative kind of color blocked element to that particular garment. And you can pretty much use it anywhere. Okay. Who needs one? My world, everyone needs one. Okay. The garment sewer, the quilter, anybody that does home dec, and even a long arm quilter. Okay. And I will show my long arm quilters why they need a particular machine for their business. Okay. Okay. So why? Why would you have a serger? And my question to that is, why not have one? It's small for the most part. It takes up a little bit of room. It looks nice with your other Berninas if you have a Bernina. If you don't have a Bernina, it's a good start to get yourself a Bernina. But sergers are fun. Okay. I don't use it nearly to its greatest potential. I will tell you that. But in the little bit of garment sewing that I use, I don't ever sew a garment without it, to be honest. For my quilters, all my seams around my last border get serged before it sends out to be quilted. Quilts will get serged before they get binding put on them with the backing and batting to just kind of squish things flat. All of my Annie's bags are serged before binding. They're serged before we ever start piecing things together. So everything is finished, has a finished edge just to keep raveling and that type of thing down. So these are just a couple of examples. I'm just going to show you a few pictures of some stuff that was made with an overlocker or a serger. So on the left, let me get my hands, which one's which? On the left is a blanket, just squares, fleece that were put together using a flat lock with decorative threads. On the right is your own serger cord, okay, that was created, and then felt leaves that were attached to kind of create a garland aspect. Some garment construction, a scarf with all exposed seams, the yellow sweatshirt, which I actually have made here in the store. And then just a decorative embellishment here on the right is basically using the flat lock, a decorative stitch, to create a visible embellishment to what would be a rather plain white shirt to give it some visual interest. Some other applications on the left, that fabric is roll hemmed across the top before it was gathered and attached to give it just another look. We have gathering that can be done on a serger, and you can also gather and attach to like bodices and things like that on a serger as well. So I'll demonstrate gathering today for you. And then we come to the how. How do we use a serger? And this is, I'm not going to go into huge amounts with it tonight, oh Lord, this morning. But the biggest thing is threading, okay? And that's usually the biggest challenge that everybody has got with a serger. And that's usually the first thing that immediately turns people off is, no, I don't want to. I don't like threading. I don't want to do it. And especially if you have experiences with older sergers and overlockers, yes, threading was a little bit more challenging. Even 15 years ago, now it is, and even I own a Bernina serger that's, I think it's going on 40 years old. And to be honest, I try not to have to thread it. It stays threaded with one color thread, and that's the color that I use it in, because it really is a pain it's not impossible, but it is a pain. It's not quick. Today's sergers in our line are way easier to thread, and I can sit down and have a serger threaded in pretty much 10 minutes at the most. Okay. And that's all 4 threads threaded, adjusted, and ready to go. Okay. We have a variable stitch length that we can adjust on an overlocker. We have the differential feed. And I'll show you that too today, but that basically is the ability to adjust the speed of the feed dog in a serger. There are 2 sets of feed dogs, one in the front and one in the back. And so we can speed one up or slow one down to help counterbalance stretch and puckering that may occur in a project. Then we also have knife or cutting settings. And so a serger, when you're doing 2, 3, or 4 thread techniques, there is a blade, a knife that cuts the edge off. So if you've ever made a garment, a lot of garments will tell you to sew a 5/8 inch seam and then trim your seam allowance down. A serger does it at the same time. So it trims and then finishes the edge and sews your seam for you. Okay. So it does all of that in one fell swoop versus doing it in 2 steps. Okay. Everything on a Bernina serger is color coded. Okay. So when you thread, we follow all of the color paths that are associated with that particular portion of the machine that we're threading. A serger does not have a bobbin. Okay. We have loopers, and there are 2 of them. Well, it could be 3 depending on the machine we're using, but for the most part, there's definitely 2. There's an upper looper and there is a lower looper. Okay. And those 2 threads, one wraps from the upper side of the fabric and the other wraps from the back side of the fabric, and they meet on the edge. And I'll show you that in a minute. And then we have up to 2 needles. Okay. And so in Bernina, we have yellow and green are needles, and red and blue are loopers. And the way that I remember which one's upper and which one's lower, we have blue like the sky and red like the dirt. Okay, so blue is your upper looper and red is your lower looper. Okay, and so you can see in the image here on the right, this is an upper looper, and then we have the other one is the lower looper. Bernina machines Bernina sergers use the same needles that a sewing machine uses. Okay, so it is not a special needle. However, today we are suggesting that, and a lot of the sergers are asking for an ELX needle. Okay, it still has a flat back to it. So it's not like it's a round shanked needle. It still has a flat back. It goes in the machine regularly, but on a standard needle, you've got running down the front is the groove that leads to the eye. And on the back, there's like a scarf, and it's kind of a cutout in the needle so that the hook of your bobbin can pass behind it and pick up the thread. On an ELX needle, there's a scarf in front of the needle and a scarf on the back of the needle, because that needle is passing between the 2 loopers. So it's getting a stitch going both directions. So that ELX needle and the JLX needle that we use for cover stitching can result in a slightly better quality stitch. But I worked with a standard needle in my 460s and my Burnett's for a long time. I've just recently moved over to using a serger needle, especially in the new L850 and L890. So just an option. Okay. So just an idea as to how some of the stitches that can be used on this particular machine. Let me move my head out of the way here. So we have 16 possible stitches that can be done with 2, 3, and 4 thread threadings. Okay. So depending upon how many threads it asks for, depends upon which stitch we're going to result in. So we have a couple of overlocks, we have flat locks, we have narrow seams, roll hems. Then there's some 2 thread techniques that only use 2 threads, uses 1 thread in the looper and 1 thread in a needle. Okay, and the end result will just be basically that looper thread wraps all the way from front to back on a stitch. So you see on the right there, the image is That's a flat lock, the 3 rows up at the top, and then that around this decorative section here. Oop, doop, boop, 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 come back. Around that decorative section here, that's a roll hem at the top and the bottom of that particular decorative band on a stitch. Now, we do have some other sergers or overlockers in the market that are usually referred to as cover stitch, okay? So cover stitch machines will use what we call, some of them will use 5 threads. There's an extra looper in it. Not every overlocker will cover stitch, okay? And not every cover stitch will overlock, okay? So there are what we call combo machines and then independent machines, okay? So in a cover stitch, is usually where you'll find chain stitches. You get the cover stitch, and then you have the combination stitches where it does cover and chain together. So this is what you usually see in commercially made athletic wear. Your jeans are usually sewn together with a 3-thread overlock and a chain stitch. Your t-shirts are hemmed with a cover stitch. And so this, if you do a lot of knits and things in that type of garment, a cover stitch is going to be your friend for hemming. It's what a lot of we use in knits. But for if you're a long armor, you will use a chain stitch for that. If you don't like to sew binding down, you could use a chain stitch to sew binding down with, and I'll show you a example of that here in a little bit. So that is going to give you just a little bit of an option. You can also use these stitches for decorative purposes and things along that lines, because when you're using cover stitch or the combos or chain stitch, there is no cutting involved, okay? We disengage the knife on the machine and we're just folding and hemming or assembling. No cutting of any fabric, okay? So I just want to cover real quick before we move into looking at the actual machines is what we have in the Bernina line, okay, of sergers. So we have the L450 and the L460, okay? So these 2 machines are strictly overlock, roll hem, flat lock. They are the 2, 3, and 4 thread techniques, okay? So 2, 3, and 4 thread, meaning that these machines do not do cover stitch. They do not do chain stitch, okay? They are strictly overlockers. And I see a typo. They, depending upon the machine, will depend upon, you know, the features. So like the 460 uses, has needle up, needle down, okay? So you can stop, you can put your needle down with the foot control. The 460 uses the Bernina freehand system, slide on tray tables and things along that lines. But basically both of these machines do the same 16 stitches and techniques, okay? Then we move to the new L8 series. And the main feature of this new L8 series is that they air thread. Okay, so we use an air threading technique to thread the 2 loopers in the lower portion of the machine. And the L850 is a 2, 3, 4 thread technique machine. Okay, the L890 does 2, 3, 4 and cover and chain stitches. Okay, so the L890 is what we refer to as a combo machine. Okay, it does it all. What's also really nice about the L850 and the L890 is they are free arm sergers. Okay, so I will show you that when I get to the machine. So we actually have the ability to sew in a loop on a serger, which is really nice to have the ability to do. Can be challenging especially if you do a lot of children's garments and smaller objects. We have as well our Bernette 40 series, okay? So this particular series of machines, we have the 44 that does 2, 3, and 4 threads. So that's your overlock, roll hem, flat lock. We have the B42, which does only cover and chain. Okay. So if you have a serger that does overlocking and you like it, but now you want to be able to cover and chain, we do have an option of only cover and chain. Okay. So that's the B42. And then the B48 is a combination machine. Okay. So it does the both styles of particular stitches. Okay. So we have lots of options in the Overlocker family. And the final one that we have and coming soon, probably more towards the beginning of the year, is we will have the B64, which will be a Burnett air thread serger that does, oh, I said combination, but it's not a combo machine. Sorry. It's a 2, 3, 4 thread machine. It is not combo. Okay. But we will have an air thread in this line. So sergers in the Bernina world range anywhere from basically $600 and up. Okay. And we have, well, I can't say. I have the L4 series, the L8 series here in the store on the sales floor. I have a B42 here on the floor. The rest of them are currently on order. And you know how that goes in this world right now. So let's take a minute and talk about, and let's switch over. We're gonna switch over to the camera so I can show you a serger, okay, or an overlocker. So what I'm gonna be sitting at, let me carefully get up here and move without choking or knocking anything over. This is, I'm sitting at, this is an L460. Okay, so the 450, 460. I have, there is a slide on tray that comes with this machine so that gives you a larger flat surface. I try to back up some here so you can see. So there's a trash can to catch all your cut fabric. And then inside of here is where we do all of the threading. Okay, so everything's color coded for you. Okay, we just follow dots. We have all of our necessary tools live in the front cover. And then we thread. It looks way more complicated than it is. Okay, we even have a little holder to hold our needles for us that live in there. So I have this machine set up for what we call a 3-thread overlock. Okay, so I have both loopers threaded and I have one needle. I have the right hand needle in here, so it's a narrow 3-thread overlock. Okay, if we used the left needle only, we would have what we refer to as a wide overlock because it would be farther distance between the looper and where the needle would pick up at. So first here, I'm just going to, I also have a slide seam guide attached to the serger. So somebody had asked about how to measure and keep good seam allowances. I will talk about that. One would be get yourself a seam guide if they make one for your serger. My presser foot is down. We have the ability on the presser feet to lift the front of the foot because we need to start the fabric in front of the knife. Okay, if we start back here, we're not going to be cutting off any edges because the knife is up here. So we're going to start in front of the knife. Okay. Sergers are fast. Okay. And we can serge off and create a tail. So this is a 3-thread overlock. Okay, so the blue is my upper looper. The pink is my lower looper, and the light blue is my needle. Okay, and I want to let me do that again. I don't like. Arm out of the way of the camera. Okay. So upper looper, lower looper, everything meets right along the edge. The nice cut edge is where the two loopers interlock, and the needle stitch is what's holding them together. Okay. Now, when we would be sewing a garment, okay, okay, hold on one second. I see some questions. Miss Kathy, yes, you should have a seam guide. I believe they were coming with the sergers. It's probably in this white box. It's where it should be. If not, let me know. The blade on a serger should last you a very long time. You actually get an extra blade in your toolkit. Should you accidentally run over a pin with it, which is a naughty thing in overlocking. And that's usually the only thing that's going to cause damage to that is if you try to cut something in half that wasn't meant to be cut. I mean, like I said, the 30-year-old serger that I'm using has never had its knives changed. So just watch what you're cutting. But it's just one little screw in there and you can change it out. So let me show you how to gather, okay? Because gathering, yes, we have a variety of presser feet, okay? Not nearly as many as you have for your sewing machines, but we do have presser feet for the serger, but we can do a lot of techniques for gathering and stuff without even needing to put on a special presser foot. I don't use the gathering attachment or the gathering foot, mostly because I use that foot if I need to attach something to something I'm gathering. But for the most part, if I'm trying to pre-gather something, then serger is going to be fine, just the basis, okay? So I'm gonna start so that you can see, okay, what's here, and I'm gonna check. Yeah, there we go, okay. So there's a couple of ways that we can gather. One would be to increase the stitch length, and that's going to do not really so much gathering, but ease something in. So if you needed to just ease something in, you can, and you can kind of see that it's starting to do a little bit right there. The next thing that we could do is we could increase the differential feed, which is a turn of a knob. And so what increasing the differential feed is going to do is it's going to take this front feed dog is going to push fabric faster back towards the needle. Okay, so you can see that it's starting to gather. Now, the next way that I gather is we increase the tension on your needle. Okay, now I'm only using one needle. We could do this with the 4-thread overlock and do 2 needles, but you will see that it's already gathering. Now, the key to remember here is when you increase needle tensions really high, you do not surge off of fabric with your needle tensions up as high as it is, okay? Needle tension needs to go back to normal and then you can surge off of the fabric. So, get my hand out of the way. There's our gathering. If you need it to gather more, you can grab a hold of the needle thread, get my arm out of the way, and you can pull and get more gather or less gathering. Do this so that you can see. Okay, so that is how I would gather. Okay, so for example, this bag. Out here and do this. Raise that up. This bag is, these were folded and pieced long strips so that we have a finished edge top and bottom. And then we ran it through the serger to gather this before it was then sewn down and attached to this bag. Okay. So that is one technique and one place that you can use it. This bag, okay, So first we used a 4-thread overlock just to finish the edge of the fabric. It's just one piece. It's not even folded over. It's just the edge. And then we gathered it on the serger and then positioned it on the bag and stitched it down. Okay. And then it was just one layer and it needs to be ironed. Okay. So that is something quick. Okay. All right. That is gathering with a serger. Okay. All right. Now, the question earlier was seam allowance. Okay. So your seam allowance is going to depend upon which needle that you're using. Okay. It's going to depend upon what type of stitch you're using and things along that line. So what I typically do, if I am going to, let's say, 1/4 of an inch, 5/8 of an inch, you know, that type of thing. If you don't have a seam guide, the older sergers had some measurements that were marked on the front cover. You can line up your seam guide to that. But just to verify that my seam guide is in the right place, I will take a piece of fabric, scrap fabric, and I'll mark my seam allowance on the fabric. So I know this is 1/4 of an inch. So I know that, I just unthreaded my needle here. I know that I want my needle to go down in that line that I just drew. Okay. So you want your needle to go down on that line. So if I look back at this, now on the Bernina machines, and I'm sure other brands do the same thing, is we have these there are 2 marks in the front of your presser foot, and those line up with the needles. So if I put this right mark, let me get my stiletto, on the presser foot, I'm gonna try to move this camera. Okay, so there's this little mark right here, one for each needle. This right here is going to be that right hand needle that I'm using. So if I line up my line that I'm stitching with that mark, that's exactly where my needle is going to go. Okay, and then I can move my seam guide in so it stays, oops, we don't want to gather. Let's bring everything back. And I can stitch, I can either use a seam guide or find a marking. And so when I stitch, my needle will come right down on that line, and that tells me that I'm exactly 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Okay, so I would always test it first. It will also help give you a visual, if you don't have a seam guide, at where you need to line things up at. You know, are we, you know, can you use this? You could even put, depending on your serger, you may be able to put down a piece of tape, do some sort of marking, just so that you can keep a consistent seam allowance. Okay, so there is that. I am going to change back here for a second. Give you something pretty to look at while I move the camera. I don't want to make you nauseous. I have to move the camera and the computer up and over. You could see this mess I have back here. You would laugh. End up choking myself today. All right. Okay. We're moving to the B42. So the B42 is a cover stitch, chain stitch only machine. Okay. So we still have the option to use 4 threads, okay, one of which only one looper in the bottom, okay, so we only have one looper here. So a chain stitch, if you think, I'll show you a cover stitch in a minute on a different serger. A chain stitch is going to be like what you find on the top of potato bags, dog food bags, onion sacks, things like that. So let me show you. So a chain stitch can be used, one, for decorative purposes. It can also be used for the purpose of seaming something together. Okay, so let me grab a sample here. Threads that can be used, pretty much any thread. I do have an example. I do have some threads because you can use in the loopers of the machines. We can use thicker thread than what we would use on a sewing machine. Okay, thread that you couldn't normally get through the eye of a needle, you can get through the eye of a serger looper. Okay, so we can use some decorative things. So I have some examples that use decoratives. So this is decorative chain stitch. Okay, because we're not cutting or anything like that, we can stitch and move in all directions over top of fabric. So we could embellish fabric before we cut it. You can use in that needle or looper, depending on if you're going to be stitching down or if you're going to be stitching right side up. You can change what thread looks like. You can hem with a chain stitch. So here's a hem that was done, and we did it with the chain on the outside, but you could hem with the chain on the inside, and then the outside would look just like a regular sewing machine stitch. So this is the machine and the stitch that for my long armers, this is what you want to use to put your quilt backs on leaders, okay? Many of you, especially if you've used a long arm frame, you know that we have to pin the backing to the zippers or to the leaders before we can use it. And it can be time consuming. You can stab yourself, safety pins, regular pins that we use here in the store, that type of thing. But you can use a chain stitch because the key to a chain stitch is if you find the thread, you pull and the whole thing unravels. Okay, so this one. Sorry for the bouncing. Don't have scissors. Hold on one second. Did not organize this well. Okay. So this is the regular front of your stitch, and then this is the chain portion of the stitch. So if you grab a hold of the thread, let me get it started here. It's not going to cooperate with me. Come on. 1 second. You got to find just the right thread to pull. Now, come on here. I just did this morning to make sure I knew exactly which thread to pull with you guys. It's making me a liar. My problem is I have two pinks in and I don't know which one's the upper thread and which one's the lower thread. Okay, let me take these glasses off for a second so I can see. But while I find that, here is a binding, okay? So binding was put on with a 3-thread or a 4-thread overlock, okay? Standard binding, you can bind and miter your edge without any problems, things along that lines. What I did, and then came over to the overlocker, is I did it with I folded the binding to the back of the project, okay? Back of the project. And then what I did was stitched in the ditch from the front, okay? And what we have is, it's not very pretty, okay? But you gotta remember, I did this morning, so we're gonna look at this end here. And so I would put the same thread top and bottom, and then you stitch in the ditch, and this is what would be on the back side of your tank. Okay, so that would be the stitch that you do for sewing binding on, okay? Yes, if you find the right thread, it pulls right out, I promise. I just can't seem to grab the right thread, so we'll do it again in a minute. All right. Technical difficulties this morning. All right, I'm going to give up here in 1 second. Ah, there we go. Found it. There it is. And you just find that thread, and then you can remove your quilt from the leader. You can unstitch, but you know, as you can tell, it takes a little bit to find that thread, so it's not like it's going to fall apart. Okay, so that is chain stitching. Okay, they make machines that just chain stitch. Okay, back in the day, it's all we used to have to sew things together was chain stitching. Okay, so it's actually a very strong seam. It's the actual seam on most of your denim jeans. Most of your denim jeans are seamed with a chain and an overlock that happens at the same time on a combo machine. And so it's a chain stitch that's as the actual seam holding, and then you have the overlock that is finishing the edges of the seam. Okay, so it is fun, okay, to look at. All right, so I'm gonna move the camera, and I'm not gonna make you sick. I'm gonna try not to make you sick. So I'll give you something pretty to look at. And we're gonna talk about roll hemming real fast. All right, so let me unravel some cords here. Roll hemming. When you look at roll hemming comes in with home deck. So you see it happen a lot on napkins and tablecloths and things along that lines. So roll hemming actually finishes the edge, it rolls the raw edge over and then covers the hem. depending upon the thread that you use, the thickness of the thread, the thinness of the thread is going to depend upon the overall look. Now, when I do a lot of roll hemming, I usually use thicker thread so that it fills. I also use a product called, I think it's called Serger now, also known as Woolly Nylon is the other brand that's out there. It's hard to find though, but this is, let me see if I can get it so that you can see it. You look at it, it's kind of fuzzy and kind of thick, okay? What happens is when you are serging, it thins out to be really fine, and when it relaxes in the seam, it expands. It's very soft. So think about pantyhose, okay? It's pretty much like pantyhose thread that's used to make pantyhose. So it's real soft and fine, covers the edge of things very nicely. I also use this when if I'm overlocking seams for a child garment. It's a little less scratchy and possibly itchy. This is a thicker thread. This is Pearl Crown that was used in the loopers when I roll hem. And so this is a roll hemmed pin tuck. Okay. On this is a roll hem over fishing line, and then you can, when you add that to a garment, you can get what we call lettuce edging. So this is actually, there is fishing wire, if I can show you in here, that we roll hem over, okay, and the machine will finish the edges for you. So roll hemming is that's basically exactly what it sounds like. We're going to start with the fabric so that we can cut it. We're going to start stitching. Okay, so the roll hem, it took the fabric and rolled it. I have the flock thread in the end, so it's a real fine, real pretty hem that's on it. Let me grab this ruffle edge is roll hemmed. Okay, I do a lot of ruffles. And I'm not hemming all those ruffles. So back in the day, in the children's garment world, the kids wore lots and lots of ruffles, and I was not hemming lengths and lengths and yards of ruffles. And so that's why we roll hem. So this is ruffles on a pair of pants. Okay. So that is just a roll hem. I'm going to slowly turn the camera now so I can show you cover stitch. Okay. So this is what I was talking about earlier is being a free arm. Okay, so the L8 series has a free arm and the new B64. So I could serge around an already sewn cuff or sleeve that's in it. And we can also cover it up. So cover stitching is, okay, so hold on one second, let's back up. We talked a minute ago about pins, and you don't want to run over pins. So in the world of serging, I like Wonder Clips, okay? So I like my Wonder Clips. If you are going to use pins, okay, for your project, When you pin, you want to pin parallel to the seam that way, and you want to do it fairly far out so that it's, you know, it's not anywhere near where this is the knife. So if you pin parallel, you don't run the risk of forgetting to pull a pin. Oh, let me get my hand out of the way. You don't run the risk of forgetting to pull a pin. Okay, so if you're gonna pin, we pin parallel. Okay. Now with cover stitching, okay, we can do 2 thread, 3 thread, you get narrow, you get wide, depending on the combination of needles and things that you use. What is here is what we call a 3 thread cover stitch wide. It's using the left and the right needle, okay? And what we get from the front is a straight stitch looking just like what a double needle would give you. And then on the back side, you get the cover stitch, okay? And it would finish across the bottom of your edge, your raw edge on the underside. There are, and we have, I don't have it, it's not available, it hasn't come in yet for the new L8 series, but the older machines and sergers that do cover stitch, they do make a hemmer guide that screws into your stitch plate so that you feed your fabric into the hemmer guide, and as long as you keep the fold where it is, then your stitching will land exactly where it needs to on the raw edge on the underside. But if you're using a knit, even if you don't hit the raw edge on the underside, it will it won't ravel. Okay, so you can just trim it off and trim it even. Let me get foot control plugged in here. Now, some of you may own 1300s. That is the Bernina 1300 MDC is a cover stitch combo machine. So it's the previous version to the L890. It's the manual thread version, okay? Now, I'm always gonna start with cover stitch. You never stitch cover stitch in the air. It always needs to start on fabric and end on fabric. You can't just make a chain, okay? We always start with our needles down, and I'm gonna stitch. I'm gonna keep my fabric kind of lined up with one of the guides here on my stitch plate. I'm gonna sew to the end. Now, to get your stitch off of the loopers, okay? So if we try to lift and pull, nothing's gonna happen here, okay? So to remove a cover stitch, now if I was sewing in a loop, I would come back and I would stitch a little bit across where I had already sewn to lock my threads. I'm going to reach under, I'm gonna grab my 2 needle threads and I'm gonna pull them to the front. I'm gonna cut them. Okay, and then I'm gonna take my fabric and I'm gonna pull back and to the left. Okay, and what that's gonna do is it's gonna pull your top threads to the back side and it's gonna knot and lock your cover stitch in. Okay, so that it will go right, it'll lock it in. You can cut these off and you are hemmed. Okay, so there is your cover stitch. Ooh, I did a good job. Catch the raw edges and everything there. So that's the basics of a cover stitch. I did not use a header fabric. I just started right on the edge. And if this was a garment, you would be starting on fabric anyway, because it would have been, the bottom of your shirt would have already been sewn together, things along that lines. Okay. All right. I'm gonna go now and show you a couple of samples. I know I'm chatty today. I always worry I'm not gonna have enough to fill in the time, and now I have way too much. Okay, a couple of things. Decorative threads. I don't carry a lot here in the store yet because I just don't use them every day in that aspect. So I don't carry a lot. We are adding regular polyester Serger thread to our store so that for using in your sergers, the big cones are going to be on their way hopefully shortly. So we'll have the big cones of Serger will be here, okay? Decorative threads, like I said, you can use things that are thicker and fluffier than what you could use in the needle of your sewing machine. That you could use Pearl Crown Designer 7, Candlelight, confetti, 28 weight thread, that type of thing. This is a, it's gonna be hard to see, but it's a sparkly thread, okay? This is called Halo. Looks like this. It's real thin, but it's two colors wrapped together. All this is a printed tree skirt panel, okay? That we literally, the way that they're usually printed is they are usually two halves that we overlocked together. And then all I did was run that stitch around the bottom, okay, to finish it, versus me sitting there rolling the hem and top stitching it or stitching and flipping, you know, for, you know, this type of thing. Quick and easy if you needed a fast tree skirt, but didn't want to spend the time and the energy, or didn't have the time and energy to back it, bat it, quilt it, bind it, that type of thing. So earlier, yes, when I finish a quilt top, this is, I use a 3-thread overlock around my outside borders before we do long arming, okay, before I send it out to a long armor. One, it's gonna help things from coming apart. So especially like your border, like if you did mitered corners, or if your borders are pieced, that type of thing, it's just gonna help things not stretch and kind of give them a little bit more stability. So that aspect is done on the serger, okay? This project is 100% pieced on a serger. The only thing that was not done on the serger was the binding was not sewn down on a serger. I hand sewed it, but you can piece. This is quilt as you go, so it's backing and batting all together. This is a machine cover, a serger cover. So this is all done on a serger, okay? Pretty much all done with 3-thread overlock. This blanket, some of you that have been with me a long time probably recognize this. This blanket, little heirloom blanket, is all done on a serger. So pin tucks, lace insertion, and then it was quilt as you go. The only thing that was not done on the serger was the outside binding piece. Okay, wasn't sewn down. I talked about earlier on bags. All my seams and pieces are overlocked when I do a bag. So if I don't ever get to putting the binding on it, it still looks pretty on the inside. Okay. Garments. I use, I showed you roll hem. So I wasn't into hemming all of that ruffle, okay? Because it's not just on the bottom of the pants, it's on the bottom of the shirt. I also finish all of, well, not that pair of pants. Usually, I finish all of my inside seams are done with a serger. Okay, so everything is finished on the inside for the quilt. Give me 1 second. Plug my computer in. Chain stitch, cover stitch, binding. So you can even cover stitch binding. So this is a hooded towel. Okay. So that was bound in t-shirt fabric. So on the front side is just like what we did on the black. Okay. So the front looks just like this one, and on the back it looks like this. So on the front and on the back. Okay, so that is your cover stitch. Garments, double gauze. Okay, so double gauze clothing. If you do, you know, it's light and airy. This is just roll hemmed. All the raw edges are roll hemmed. There are no foldovers, no seams, no hems. It's just raw edge. Roll hem all around the raw edges. Okay. This backpack. Okay. 100% put in, including the zipper. Okay. So you can put zippers in with your serger. Okay. So zipper is sewn in, and there's my hair is on that. Sorry. And then it can be I can't say I put it in straight, but there is what it would look like. Okay. Sewn in. Garments. Let me grab her over here. Okay. This knit dress, okay, all was put in, it's hard to see, but she's on a mannequin over in the Bernita room. She's not hemmed yet, okay. I just haven't cover stitched hemmed her sleeves or her bottom hem, but the neckline, everything was put in on the serger. There's the yellow shirt. Okay. So again, all of the necklines were cover stitched. They are overlocked, the sleeves, everything is put together. What else? Oh, here's some serger lace added to the bottom. This was a very early example of serger lace. Takes a little practice, but I wouldn't use two colors like I did there. It was an experiment. And the last thing, my most proud item for serging is my necklace. Okay. So my necklace was all made on a serger. And some of you probably took this class a while ago. I don't know if I will teach it again. But this necklace is all threads and beads over fishing line. Okay, so it's multiple rows of fishing line. You roll hem over it, feed a bead on, scrunch it up, roll hem over it, put a bead on, and then do as many strands as you want, put them all together, and then use your jewelry findings to make a necklace. So that is probably my most prized treasure. It was a work of love, no doubt about it. It was not a fast project, but it was fun. Maybe one day I will do it again and fine tune my technique in that aspect. So, all right. I think for the most part, I think I've tried to keep up with questions throughout so that I didn't have to, because I knew it was going to go long. Blade changes, as long as you don't hit pins, you'll be good for a long time. Yes, seam guides are options for older machines. I just have to order them in if I don't have one in stock, but magic, decorative threads. All right. Any other questions? Well, I hope that kind of gave you just a general overview into what overlockers and sergers are, the kind of things that they can do. I will maybe do a little live later in next week on the threading of a air thread and a threading of a standard overlocker. I just it needs to be a recorded video because it's going to require me to have a camera person to be able to zoom in the parts. I can't do it while I can't do it with a phone in one hand and only one-handed. I'm talented, but not that talented. The air threading on the machines just threads the loopers, okay? So it only threads loopers, it does not thread needles. Depending upon the machine, the machines come with manual needle threaders. The L850 has a built-in needle threader. But the air thread only threads the loopers, whether it's upper, lower, and chain cover stitch looper. Okay. Just know that if you do have a serger, now there is a specific order that a serger needs to be threaded in. Okay. So if Wendy was here, I'd make her dance, but she's not. So ready? Upper looper, lower looper, right needle, left. Okay. So when you are threading a serger, that is the order in which it needs threaded. It is not threaded left to right or right to left. It's upper looper, lower looper, right needle, left. Okay. And that's the order in which you thread. I don't know how the machine knows. It knows. And things won't look right if it's not threaded in the right order. Okay. However, the new L8 series, you can thread in any order that you want. So it's not as picky, but any other serger from the 460, 450, the 1100, 1200, 1300, 009s, 008, 700s, all those 334s, 234s, upper looper, lower looper, right needle, left. Okay. And if you haven't done that, typically that's your problem if you're having issues. Okay. Yes, Miss Connie, whenever you thread the machine, you always see Wendy, upper looper, lower looper, right needle, left. We always sing it and dance when we teach class in how to thread a serger. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think for the most part, that is, that's it. I know y'all want me to dance again. I'm not going to do it again. Upper looper, lower looper, right needle, left. Okay. And that will resolve all your problems in the world of serging. Now, you don't have to thread every time you want to change colors. You can tie knots and pull through. Okay. So that is the trick to it. If threading is not your thing, you make sure that you don't run out of thread and you leave a tail. We tie an overhand knot and we pull through. All right, everybody. Yes, I will. Yes, if you have sergers, if you have older Bernina sergers, I can assist you in threading them. I do it for people all the time. You just bring me your serger, bring me your thread, and I will thread it and set it up for you in whatever stitch that you need it done in. Okay, I have no problem. I will gladly assist you in any way possible for you to get the serger out, get the cover off of it, and use it. All right, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you soon back here live from Inside Material Girls. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.